It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Take Command podcast, a podcast hosted by me, Craig Hoffman, with him, Logan Paulsen, where I have to resist doing a British accent to start the show because Logan is back off vacation from London. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. You guys did a good job while I was away, or you did a good job. And then obviously the show with Jeremy was a ton of fun. So
he's a fun guy, that Jeremy Green. Interesting. And also, again, thanks to John Kime for giving us so much time on the mailbag episode early in the week. It was really fun to talk to those guys, get some different perspectives on some things, talk through some things. But we are excited because, Logan, it is finally here. It is NFL Draft Week, and we are going to spend the bulk of today's show going over your big board because you have made your final big board for the 2025 draft. Of course, this is final because we're basically out of time. We will then use this big board in part to do one final mock draft later on in the week, so stay tuned for that. Our schedule's a little up in the air for the week as is, but we promise you at least one more mock draft before the actual thing. And then we are still deciding our plans for Thursday night/Friday morning, but certainly by midday on Friday, we'll have something to you on whatever happens in the first round. So this is why you subscribe, because sometimes your boys are not the best schedulers, and then whenever something happens, it's right there in your feed on the audio, or of course, you get a notification that says, hey, new video from the Team 980 or 106.7 The Fan. They got the boys talking football again. So, Logan, let's dive into your big board. It is a thin big board at the top. Talk us through tier one real quick, and then if we can compare it to, say, last year and how many guys were at the top in this upper echelon. Just what are we talking about in terms of a lack of elite talent in this draft?
yeah, I mean, I think there's only three kind of like top tier prospects. You know, I was really tempted to put like Colston Loveland, the tight end for Michigan, in there, but obviously the injury last year kind of pulled me back off that. Mason Graham was another guy that I thought about putting in the first tier, but he just didn't. I think the thing about Mason Graham is like you can set your watch by him. He plays with great hands, plays with great base, is productive in the run game, but I didn't really see any of that top end pass rush, you know, which is kind of what you're hunting for with that defensive tackle spot. So I think he's a good player. I think he's kind of one of the safer picks in the draft, but you know, like what is his ceiling is the question. So ultimately you end up with Ashton Genty, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter kind of in that order. And, you know, I think maybe I switch Ashton Genty and Travis Hunter, but the only thing with Travis Hunter that I have a hard time with is just like, does the NFL know what to do with him? And I just get really concerned about that because I think in any other year, you know, he's probably not a top 5 or top 10 corner. He's probably not a top 5, not top 10 wide receiver.
And when you say that, you mean a top 10, top 5 pick, not a top, like he would be near the top of any either corner class or receiver class in most years. Just he wouldn't be necessarily a top 10 pick at either position or a top 5 pick at either position.
Yeah, like I think about some of the corners that I've watched, you know, Sauce Gardner, he's the corner in Houston now. He just got
Stingley.
paid. Yeah, Stingley. Like he's not as good as those guys. And again, he's a very good player, but he's not as good as those guys. I think about the receivers that we watched last year. You know, your Malik Neighbors, your Roma Dunzes, your Harrisons, and I felt like he's good, but he's not in that same tier. But I think it speaks to kind of the quality of the draft class this year. And again, like there are some issues that I have with him in terms of like he's not super polished, he's not super refined, he's not playing every down as hard as he can, which makes sense because he's playing like 140 snaps a game. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there for me about like best use for him and best kind of fit. So yeah, but ultimately I fell on the fact that he's a special talent. We haven't really seen anybody do anything close to what he's done ever in at least to my knowledge. Maybe you go back to like the 40s and the 50s, there's guys that are playing both ways, but in the modern era NFL, you haven't. So he's just a special football player, great ball skills, great instincts for the game, great athlete. So he's the top tier guy. But the point to your original question is there's only 3 of them. So
yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about Hunter because we haven't talked about him yet.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of interest. One, I would say that ironically, the guy who maybe most did this recently was Dion. Dion played a little bit of offense back in the day for San Francisco and Dallas. They'd use him in very, very select small packages.
Like Champ Bailey too.
Yeah, Champ. is another guy that very, very small select. But those guys are primarily corners, which I think is what most people think that Hunter's best use is. But Cleveland might use him more on offense. Like with where their roster is at and what they need, they might actually look at him as a wide receiver. And I think the interesting thing in trying to project him at either position is he's never spent dedicated time at either one. And again, we don't know if he will. He had the big, bold statement last week where he's like, if I don't get to play both ways, like I'm not playing football. Like he clearly wants to do both. Now, what does that mean? If that means he wants to play full time both, like buddy, you got a reckoning coming to you, because that's not going to happen in the NFL. You can't dedicate the time to the details and the game plans, and not to mention there's no southeast west directional state on the schedule. It's 17 NFL games. That is a different kind of grind. But if he is spending most of his time, let's go corner first. Like if you're projecting him out a couple years and saying, hey man, you're going to get top flight cornerback skills training from an NFL DB's coach, and you're going to spend time on it in a way that you never have been able to before. What kind of cornerback is he? Is he on the Stingley, Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain type of class, or is he a step below that in your mind in terms of a projection?
I think there are people that you'd ask and they'd say, yeah, he is in that same group. To me, I worry about body size a little bit and just general physicality and his ability to tackle and play the game physically the way those guys play the game. So again, that's one concern. Like, how does he match up against bigger receivers? But he does have good play strength. So, I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, and he does have like this superpower ability to track and catch the football. So maybe I personally am a little bit.
The ceiling's
skeptical.
there.
Yeah. I'm a little bit skeptical because the body size, I think that's going to limit what he ultimately can be because of the strength. But he moves well. He's got a great feel. Like, you can see his ability to, like, the fact that he plays receiver. He understands route concepts really well. He understands spacing. He's a very, very smart football player. So I say he's close. I'd probably put him in a tier below, or my confidence that he reaches that kind of first tier is a little bit lower than that. But I think the ceiling's there for sure.
And then same question at wide receiver. Your team like Cleveland, and maybe sees him more useful to your roster. And like, again, he's never gotten that really high level receiver coaching to the level of detail that you need to excel at the NFL level. But he clearly has got a great feel for it. Like his kind of knack for coming back for the ball and like just doing some of the instinctual things that the best receivers do.
Yeah,
it's there. So what happens if you polish him up? Like, what kind of receiver can he be? Can he be a top 10 receiver in the NFL?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Because like right now, I think he's a better corner. Like when you just watch the film, I think he's better at that side of the football. But I think he's got a higher ceiling playing receiver. I think his body type, we've seen smaller receivers do well. He just catches the football. You mentioned some of the nuanced stuff he does well. He does have like this slasher's mentality when he gets the football in his hand. Yeah, so I think he could be a top 10 player. Again, the body size is a little bit concerning because there are times where you see guys get hands on him or he gets disrupted or he just is not a big man. And the other thing that's a little bit concerning, and again, he's a good football player. He's one of the 3 best football players in this draft class, depending on who you talk to, maybe the best, obviously depending on who you talk to. But the thing that I keep coming away from with him is just, is he as fast as people think? Is he as strong as people think? Because he didn't run a 40. He did his pro day, he did the field workout, all that stuff. He worked out exclusively as a wide receiver. And again, if you are going to be a top 10 player at the position, you need an elite trait. Like, I don't think he runs routes like Justin Jefferson. He could. He's kind of wired that same way in terms of twitch. He doesn't have the kind of after the catch ability of like a Jamar Chase or a Tyreek Hill. He doesn't have the size of like an AJ Brown. So I do have my doubts, like, is he just a really good 2 in an offense? Maybe, because the size, the physicality, the lack of top end, like vertical juice is something that comes to mind. But again, we're nitpicking here a little bit. A very good football player.
Yeah, it was interesting because like Derek Klassen on the Athletic Football Show is like, this dude's one of the best athletes I've ever seen. And I understand why he says it, but also have the same questions, right? Like, you think about one of the best athletes I've ever seen. You think of a guy like Nick Manwari, the safety from South Carolina, who's got the craziest testing numbers of probably anyone in this class because he did all the stuff. But is he fluid, and does he track the ball well? Like, there's more to athleticism than, and we've talked about this throughout this process in chunks and spurts, in fits and starts, but like, there is more to being an athlete than running fast and jumping high. It's how do you connect all your skills together? How do you decelerate is actually often just as important, if not more important, than accelerating. But you still do have some of that stuff. Like Jamar Chase he's only 6'6", but he is like chiseled, rocked up, strong, and he runs a 4.3. Like, Travis Hunter's not that. So can his fluidity and smoothness and quick cutting ability, like I'd assume that his 3-cone would be pretty elite if he ran that. Like, is that enough to make up for the lack of top end juice when you are at the NFL level? And the best of the best corners have that, and they have some much closer movement skills than whoever you're playing against in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the question that I keep coming back to. Again, because like the athleticism comment, I totally understand that. Like, and I'm glad that you're making the distinction there, because I do think he's a tremendous athlete. He's a tremendous, like, physical, kinesthetic problem solver in a way. And it's funny, like when you're doing, I do these write-ups for every single, I had to do 100 little write-ups because this big board is going to go up on the Commander's website. But I'm going through writing them up, and I'd come to a guy and I'm like, Kane Moderno from UCLA is a really good example of this, like the linebacker. He's one of the best athletes I've ever seen, but he didn't run a 4.2. He didn't, jump out the gym. He tested well, but he just has like this crazy movement competency. And I think Travis Hunter kind of falls in the same boat. And it's just about, is that, Justin Jefferson didn't run a fast 40, but he's got this crazy ability to double stick and work stems. And he has a great feel as a route runner, but he's played receiver his whole life. Right. And so can Travis Hunter use this physical competency that we're talking about to develop some of that stuff is really the ultimate question, because the athleticism and I cannot overstate like how well he tracks the football, how well he attacks the football in the air. Like it's one of the most impressive skill sets in the entire class. If you're looking for like a superpower, like that's what he does well. So maybe, but it needs a little bit of polish, needs a lot of work to get him to kind of in this top 10 range, And I think that's the thing about literally every player that I did in this class. Like, there are questions about him. There's outside, even Abdul Carter, like the injury history is a question mark. Ashton Genty, the workload, small school competition. Like, there's questions about. There's nobody that's like Joe Alt. There's nobody that's like Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik those guys don't exist in this class, and it makes this process really, really challenging compared to last year.
Yeah, not to mention there's not 3 quarterbacks in that tier like there was last year with
like
Caleb,
Drake May and
Drake, and obviously Jaden Daniels. If you had to bet on last thing on big picture, then I want to lock in on some of the positions, and we'll start with edge, as that's the one that I think most Commanders fans are most interested in. But if you had to pick any other player that's not in tier 1, and they probably are going to be in tier 2, but who knows, maybe it's a tier 3 guy that you think, if it goes right, this dude's a superstar, this dude's an all-pro. Who's the guy whose upside you would consider, like whose ceiling is that high in this group or in this draft that's outside of tier 1?
For edges, you're saying?
No, in general, any position. If you had to bet on any player in this draft to become a superstar that you couldn't put in tier 1 for whatever reason, who would that player be?
Yeah, I think it's Colston Loveland for me, which is probably surprising for a lot of people. He's the tight end out of Michigan. Like, when I watch him, I'm just like, he gets the nuance. We talk about Zach Ertz all the time. We talk about how he understands how to get open. He understands leverages. He doesn't lose speed out of the cut. Like, that's what Colston Loveland is to me, right? He just, like, there's a couple clips of him running choices and angle routes and big sails and deep ends and crossing the field. And I'm like, this is an NFL tight end. Like, that's an NFL skill set in a way that, to me, like, obviously Brock Bowers is a unicorn special talent, but in terms of just route running, like, Colston Loveland's a better route runner. Now, Brock Bowers does other stuff well, like the way he tracks the football, the yards after contact. Like, he's a special generational, like really, truly generational guy. But in terms of just route running, I'd say Colston Loveland's probably more efficient at it, right? So I think if he gets to the right system, if he gets the right coach, like, he's got a great opportunity to kind of be in that pantheon of like the kind of top 10, top 5 tight end in the NFL, and then continue to grow and develop. But again, it needs to be the right fit. Like, if he goes to Indianapolis for whatever reason, like, I think he's going to struggle, because obviously the quarterback situation there is difficult. And when you have a quarterback situation that's not effective, like it's going to negatively affect you. But if he went to Denver, for example, with Bo Nix and Sean Payton, a guy who understands how to use that skill set, I think he could be, kind of the leading receiver for the rookie class. So I just think he's special in a way that I'm excited to watch translate to the NFL level.
All right. Again, this full big board will be up on the Commanders website here in the next couple of days. But let's dive into it further on some of the Commanders' positions of need here on Take Command. Take Command Podcast, Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. Logan's big board coming to the Commanders website near you. It's just on your laptop. It's the same Commanders website for everybody. Or you can also do it on your phone, your tablet. You know how the internet works. It's 2025. All right, Logan. I will read though from your big board. Tier 1 edges, you have Abdul Carter. Tier 2 edges, you have no one. Yeah. Tier 3, Mike Green, Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart, Donovan Ezeraku. Is that the actual order, or is Ezeraku the final guy in tier 3, or is that just kind of how you put him in here?
Yeah, I think he's probably the final guy in tier 3, but I think just to add context, him, Mykel Williams, and Shamar Stewart are about as close as you could possibly get. They're clustered right there, and so I think the more I've watched Donovan Ezeraku, when I first started this, when I did my first list of 10, he didn't make my list. He just, whatever reason, I didn't watch him or I didn't remember his film. But then as I've kind of revisited and gone back to him, I think he maybe outside of Mike Green has the closest kind of proximity to being a difference maker as a pass rusher right out of the gate. So I think he could be really special. So, when I see I get so excited when I see a mock draft saying, oh, he'll be available at 29. I'm that's exactly the skill set that the Commanders are looking for in terms of a guy that can be disruptive on a down-to-down basis as a pass rusher. So, I'm very, very high on him and his skill set, no doubt.
Yeah, he is very interesting because of the body type and everything. And that's the thing that makes the edge position so hard is there's going to be other teams that just probably don't even have him on the board because his skill set is the lighter kind of bendier or whatever edge is not for whatever reason something that they want or they want the bigger body type. And I think, we've talked about Shamar Stewart a lot, but he is so fascinating because he is a Myles Garrett piece of clay. And I don't say that flippantly. He is Myles Garrett size, roughly Myles Garrett's weight. It's hilarious because they went to the same school. And he is also Myles Garrett athleticism, 40-inch vertical, 11-foot broad, the whole thing. Except for Myles Garrett is incredibly productive and was incredibly productive, and thus he was a number 1 overall pick. And he did everything at an A+ level in college and has translated most of that to the NFL, and that's why he's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Shamar Stewart has never had more than a sack and a half in a season. And so what you do with that is difficult. And, where I think where I've kind of landed on Stewart is at 29, you're never going to find a better piece of clay. So if that's the best guy available, I'm willing to take it. If Stewart and Ezeraku were somehow on the board together, which feels very, very unlikely, and I think it's very unlikely all these guys are off the board, I'd probably go in Ezeraku's direction for having more proof. But if, I think that's kind of the interesting thing is these guys, Williams and Walker and Stewart are pretty much all projections. And then Green, there's obviously the other off-field stuff that we know about, but he was the FBS sack leader, and Ezeraku was second. So you're talking about two very different, not extremes, I guess extremes in terms of production, but two very, very different evals that wind up with roughly the same score in terms of the tier and bucket that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, Mike Green, I think could be special, but again, there's concerns about his ability to play with power consistently. But when you watch the film, he's just a maniac, man. He's just an absolute lunatic the way he plays the game. And I love that. And obviously the off-field stuff is a thing, but the more guys I talk to, the more people that I've talked to, they're less concerned, around the NFL, they're less concerned about the off-field stuff. So I'm kind of putting my hat in that, and that the people that I've talked to don't seem to be concerned about it. So I'm becoming less concerned about it. And then obviously as you go down the list, Jalen Walker, is that his name? Jalen from Jalen Walker. I mean,
by the way, if people see me on YouTube looking down, it's because I have the beast with me here. The hard copy version that Logan is definitely not jealous that I have.
I'm very jealous of it.
At all.
I've been
I'm so
futzing around
sorry.
on my phone for weeks with that thing. Anyway, yeah. So then Jalen Walker to me is a projection. I think he's, but when you watch him, there's a physicality and a competitive toughness and an intellect that seems to show up. Mykel Williams, again, when you watch his 2023 stuff, you understand why people thought he was going to be a top 10 pick this year. Like, he's playing on one leg. He's got this ankle injury the whole year. And I just think the road for him to get to the NFL is so short. He's like going to be such a good player right out the gate. And then we just talked about Shamar Stewart and Donovan Ezaraku. And I think, again, like, those guys are kind of your flavor. And I think they're like 23 or like 22 and 23 respectively, if you're going on order on my big board. So I think they're really good football players. I think they're going to get pushed up in a class where there's not a ton of talent. But yeah, man, like, if Ezaraku or Shamar Stewart were there at 29, which seems extremely unlikely, I think that'd be a great fit for the Washington Commanders.
So you listened to the conversation that I had with Jeremy about James Pierce. And I feel like we should talk about him for a second as well. He's the top of tier 4 for you on the edges.
Yeah.
Hearing what Jeremy had to say, and also, like, you got him in tier 4. He's got him 6 overall. So there's a huge difference in evaluation on the player, as well as, kind of, I think, the comfort level on what you're hearing. In terms of, the effort level, who he is as a kid, all that kind of stuff. Where have you landed on Pierce, and why have you landed tier 4 on Pierce at this point in the process?
So there's a couple things that kind of go into this. One is, I think, is Pierce a great athlete? Sure. But is he a very specific type of rusher? That's also true. And so what I mean by that is, like, he is a pure speed. They call them high rushers. So I'm going to rush high on the tackles, outside shoulder, and really try to win with speed, kind of chasing the arc. When I look at guys in the NFL, like, those guys, yes, like Vic Beasley is a good example of this. Like, can you be productive doing that? Yeah, but
he had one good year.
Yeah, the consistent year-on-year production is more challenging to come by because it's easier to deal with that guy, right? Like, I used to talk to Vic when I was with him in Atlanta and be like, if you could just bull like 10% of the time, you'd have 15 sacks every year, but you don't want to. And so when I see this rush profile that James Pierce brings, where I'm rushing high, I don't always use power, I have it, but I don't use it, and I'm a little bit stiff, I'm like, how effective is that? Now, if he was crystal clear, no off-field stuff, like, maybe I'd be a little bit higher on him, but I generally don't like that rush profile generally. You know what I mean? It just makes me nervous because of the people that I've played with that have played like that, and I've blocked people like that, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to set vertical. You're going to run at my upfield shoulder. I'm going to keep setting. You're going to keep chasing. And eventually, like, you're going to run yourself out of the play. He has a little bit of that to him. Now, I'm not saying he does that all the time. There's times where he beats you inside. There's stuff that he does well. But I think people get so caught up with the 40 time, the twitch, and you should, because those are important things for playing the position. But I think there's other things, other players that I like more at the spot in terms of play style, consistent effort, like, I want to bet on, And so then I know Jeremy said that he's talked to a bunch of people. I got to call Jeremy and figure out who he talked to about it, because, like, almost every person to a man that I've spoken to about James Pierce Jr. has said that the staff there is not super stoked on him. So for whatever that's worth, like, I trust Jeremy. He does a great job researching, but I just haven't found those people that he's talking to. And again, it could be, a false positive, whatever it is, but that the play style coupled with the off-field stuff is just so risky. Like, even in that tier 4, like, I know he's the first guy in tier, whatever that is, tier 4 or 5.
Tier 4, yeah.
Like, I like Nick Gordon, I like Landon Jackson, and I like JT Tuimalau more than him. I think they're better football players. I think I'm betting a little bit on the athlete, and that teams are going to see this athlete and be like, we can get him coached up. But in terms of guys that are more ready right now, those other 3 guys, man, I think they're awesome. I think those are Commanders football players, and I still have questions about James Pierce Jr. and his ability to be, quote unquote, a Commander. Yeah,
and that's where I ultimately land with this is I hear Jeremy's argument that University of Tennessee, as Jeremy said at the end of that conversation, like, look what just happened with their quarterback and pull the string. You pull the string and you're like, oh, Tennessee's a mess as a program. Their NIL collective is like one of the most ridiculous ones in the country. They are paying kids out the wazoo. And at 20, 21 years old, that might create a sense of entitlement, a way about you that doesn't come off great. And there's definitely a chance you mature out of that. But in the first round of the NFL draft, are the Washington Commanders going to take someone who does not have the Commander's tag? I think there's no way. absolutely no way that Adam Peters is going to do that. And even if they think that, if they got him in the third round, could they help in their environment, and Dan Quinn and Adam and, the staff, the other players they brought in, a guy like a Dietrich Wise, incredible mentor, like, could they get something great out of James Pierce? I definitely think that's possible. That's not an unreasonable thing to question, but he's not going to get the commander tag. Like, he's not going to earn that based off of who he is right now. And if that's the case, he's not getting drafted by them in the first round. Now, I say that definitively, and watch, they'll take him in the first round and be like, well, we trust our people, and we think he's an athlete. And if so, like, great. And to me, that would tell us that, there's enough there inside him that they think they can get it out. And it really is immaturity, and immaturity can turn to maturity with age and guidance. But I just have a really hard time believing that anybody who doesn't have the commander's tag is going to be their first pick in this draft. And I don't see him as a guy who has that.
Yeah. And it shows up on film a little bit too. And I think that's the other thing. Like, talk about Mike Green and his off-field stuff. We've talked about that a little bit, but like, he plays like an absolute psycho. Jalen Walker, psycho. Like those other guys, Shamar Stewart, say what you want about him, but like, he plays like he wants to get in a car accident every play. Landon Jackson, same thing. Nick Scorton, same thing, right? So like, if I'm betting on somebody, and then you watch James Pierce Jr. and he's kind of, the ball's away and he's kind of moping around, jogging. He's not super consistent with his effort against the run. You're like, again, when these other guys are willing, it's seemingly, to die on the football field for you, like, I'm going to go in that direction. I'm going to invest in that. Donovan Ezeraku, same thing, man. He plays hard, like, and I want that. And again, I'm an old blue collar blocking tight end, right? And I think about players that I don't want to play, and those are the guys that come up. And I've played guys like, who are great pass rushers that take plays off, and they are going to be Hall of Famers, right? But the guys that I would lose sleep over at night were the guys that played absolutely like psychos and played hard. And I think that's where there's just so many guys that play that way. So why would I risk it with someone that I'm unsure about, even though he's a tremendous athlete? And again, he's the number one guy in my tier 4, because I think people are going to bet on the athlete. But if Logan Paulsen, GM, is sitting on the table, I'm like, shoot, I want Landon Jackson. I want Nick Scorton. I want Tumalau from Ohio State. Like, those are the guys, like, when you watch them, I'm just like, the ceiling isn't there, but the floor is so high, and just like good cultural pieces. So that's kind of where I fall on it. And again, if they drafted James Pierce Jr., am I excited as a Commanders fan? Absolutely. Because he's got something special in terms of athletic juice and upside. But again, I'm a little bit dubious that they go that direction, because I think there's just other people at the spot that are going to play hard for you all the time.
Is there anybody else, tier 5, tier 6, that you are really, really pumped about if they draft and you think fits kind of both the off-field from what you know and the on-field profile of what they want? So as you said, you got Pierce, Scorton, Jackson, Tuamalau in tier 4. Tier 5 starts with Femi Oladejo and goes from there.
Femi Oladejo, I mean, gosh, man, like, talk about a commander. Like, and I'm probably a little bit higher on him than like the national media, but like, watching his leadership, watching his play style, like, it just screams commander to me. I do think Uman Yellen from Ole Miss is interesting, because he's kind of this pass rush project that could develop. Braden Swinson from LSU has that same kind of commandery type feel, good length, understands how to win. And then you got a guy like Jack Sawyer, who, again, I think a lot of people probably have higher than me, but plays hard, smart, instinctive football player. I worry about his ceiling. I think on the podcast, Jeremy said, he reminds me a little bit of Hubbard from Cincinnati. I think that's a great comp. That's exactly what he reminds me of. But the thing about Hubbard is he plays hard, and he's been a consistent starter for 7 years in the NFL. And so if that's what you're getting in like the bottom of the second, early third round, like, that feels like a winning combination as far as Commanders football players go. And then I know we're talking about edge rushers, but another guy that I'm a little bit lower on than the consensus that I just feel like I need to throw out there for Commanders tag is Tyler Booker from Alabama. Like, he is, everybody you talk to said this guy is like a leader. He understands football. He wants to be great. And again, the athletic testing is a little bit on the low side, which is why he's down the list for me. But God bless, like, from anybody you talk to, anybody that's given him an interview is just like, he's got that vibe to him. And so again, just to kind of give another name that people might not be thinking about for the Commanders, but I think would be an interesting fit there at 29.
Yeah, that definitely, and I've seen him mocked all over the place. You see him in the 50s sometimes. You see him in the, like there's a possibility that he's available for them at 61. That feels very unlikely. There's also a possibility he's gone at 12 or 13,
which is crazy.
And there's just that's something else about this class too that I think is interesting.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I kind of facetiously on one of the shows I did 2 weeks ago with the Command Center guys, I said there's not a difference between 5 and 40, and I kind of was like joking around when I said that. But after doing this, I was like, there's really not. Like, it's really, truly, you could probably push that to 55 if you wanted to. But there's really, truly, like, I like this player more than this player. And it's totally subjective. Like, one for me that's really interesting on the big board is Malachi Starks versus Nick Emenwari. Like, Malachi Starks is like my 8th player or something like that, just because I trust the film so much when I watch it. But if you said, I'm actually higher on Nick Emenwari, I'm going to take him at 8, you're not wrong. Like, the athletic upside that he brings is 100% there. I just value different things than you. And I think you just go through every player. We were talking about Matthew Golden earlier compared to Tetra McMillan. Like, it's just like that for a big chunk of this draft. So in some ways, I think it's better that the Commanders are picking at 29 because there's going to be a plethora, a cornucopia of good football players there. You just got to make sure you've identified the commander of this group.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk more about the receiving group in a second, and kind of some last minute thoughts on positionally where Washington could go. But it is there's a couple things that then are kind of side effects of that. And I thought Dame was talking about this on their show the other day, where it's kind of like, hey, someone's got to be my 8th player. The guy like Malachi Starks in a normal draft, in last year's draft, is comfortably in the 20s. And you're like, that's kind of where a player of that caliber belongs. Perfect. And you're like, he's a safety. He could be really good, but like not a prime position in a lot of ways. And there's some real question marks, like kind of what's his position? Is he a nickel? Is he a safety? Like you get the right usage package and he's Brian Branch, and like that would be sweet. And in that way, if the Jets took him at 7 or traded back and took him at 12 because the Cowboys want to go up and get Tet McMillan or something, like that's a great fit. Like Aaron Glenn gets Malachi Starks, you're like, crap, that dude's going to be a Pro Bowler. You could also see him being a total bust if he goes to the wrong spot. Jahdae Barron, same thing. Like these guys are the types of guys that you'd want in the 20s. And there's not enough guys to push them down. Somebody's got to be, like if you could have blank spots for the top 5, then put Genty, Carter, and who's your other tier 1 guy, Hunter, at like 6, 7, and 8. Leave 8 through 20 blank, and then start your board from there. That's how this board should look. But the problem is there's not players, and ultimately you're ranking the players in this class. And I think that is something that we're just going to have to remember for these guys for the rest of their careers. If guys underachieve based off of their draft status, is like, it's not their fault they came out in a weak class. You take who's the best player available, and that also is obviously going to affect the trades, because you could get a team that falls in love with a player and wants to trade up. But if everyone kind of agrees that 15 to 40 or 10 to 40 or 6 to 40 is the same, then like, why would you trade up? And thus that makes it really hard to trade down, because that's how that works. You can't trade down to yourself.
Dude, it's a great point. And it was so, like, I've said that. And then, but doing this, I was like, holy cow. Like, like the difference between, I don't know, Jaden Higgins and Tetra McMillan is marginal. Like, I think Tetra is better, but it's marginal. Like if you were in a dark room and we're in a draft room and you're like, I think Jaden Higgins is better than Tetra McMillan. Like, I could see it. Like, I'm not like, that's not like a crazy thing to say.
I mean, you just talked about how much you love Loveland, right? How different is Terrence Ferguson than Colson Loveland?
That's a great point, man. It's a great point, because in terms of body type, they're almost exactly the same. They're like the same height. They're about the same weight. I think Loveland has a little bit more route running technicality, but the athletes are like, you change the uniform, it's like, well, who's who? And so again, like that's, I think very highly of Terrence Ferguson, obviously, but it's a great point. It's a great point. And I think it's just one of those things where I think no player maybe typifies this better than like Mason Taylor from LSU, the tight end. Like I was for the longest time, I didn't know what to do with him. I didn't know where he fit. I was like, what's the deal? So I started talking to some of my buddies in the league, some scouts that I know, whatever. And it was just like, I trust him. And when they said that, I was just like, he's going to be like a borderline first round pick in this draft, because it's like,
I think he could be.
Yeah, because you're comparing him to other people with character issues, with work ethic issues, and all of a sudden, like, when a coach says that, or when a scout says that, I trust him in a landscape like this. Like, that's valuable, and that's going to go much higher. And I think like that's maybe the perfect iteration of that. Like, I trust Colston Loveland when I watch the tape. I know what he's going to be. Same thing with Mason Taylor.
All right, so let's wrap this conversation up with a couple of positions that maybe aren't the top of the Commanders' needs list, but there could be really interesting players available, and Logan's big board kind of illustrates that. So we'll do that to wrap up the show next. Take Command Podcast. Craig Hoffman here. Logan Paulsen there. And I want to talk about receiver, and I want to talk about D-tackle, Logan, because I think everyone understands that, like, receiver is kind of a position of need for Washington. I mean, if they had to start the season tomorrow with Noah Brown, Terry McLaurin, and Deebo Samuel, like, they'll be all right. Luke McCaffrey, you hope he takes a jump in year 2. Like, they got some other guys in that room. But clearly, I think receiver is a position that is very interesting. And I think D-tackle is interesting because this class of D-tackles is stupid deep. And there's some guys at the top of it that not a lot of people agree upon. Like, Walter Nolan is, I think Trevor Sikkema's the 8th player in this draft. He's other dudes like 45th player in this draft. So if there's a guy who falls that you really like at 29, that you're like, this dude should have gone in the top 15, knowing that Daron Payne is on the John Allen timeline, that he probably is gone after the year based off his contract, it wouldn't surprise me if they took, their one guy left in tier 1 or tier 2. And you actually have, so let's save receiver for last year, because you have a guy that I think is really fascinating in your tier 2. You have in tier 2, Mason Graham, who most people are mocking 5th to the Jags, and Derek Harmon, who I've seen mocked anywhere from top 10 to top of the second round. The defensive tackle out of Oregon. Why do you like Harmon, and would you take him if he's available at 29?
Yeah, I for sure would take him at 29.
That was kind of a dumb question when I'm staring at your big board and he's in your tier 2.
Yeah, so this is, again, speaks to the class. Like, the same reason I'm high on Malachi Starks is the same reason I'm high on Derek Harmon. Like, when I watch the film, like, he's got what you want. He's 6'5", he's 315, he's got 34.5-inch arms. He locks blockers out. He throws guys to the ground. He's got athletic upside. Like, there's a play, I think they're playing Ohio State. Maybe they're running like a keeper, a boot, and he's looping out, and it's him one-on-one with Will Howard in space, and he mirrors him and, like, tags him up and gets a sack. And I just was like, there's not a lot of people that have the measurables, that move the way he does, that can play the run and have pass rush upside. So to me, the fact that he's not higher on everyone's board, like, he's a high floor, high ceiling football player. Like, that's exactly what you want. Like, you want to make the comparison of Walter Nolan, right? Like, Walter Nolan, I understand what people see in his ceiling. I think people overstate it a little bit, but I understand it. But to me, he's also got a very low floor. And so to me, like, why would I put Walter Nolan, even if I thought he had a higher ceiling, above Derek Harmon? Because I know Derek Harmon is going to be a good pro. It's that's basically what I fell down to in terms of creating that second tier of football player, is like, the guys that are in there are guys that I'm very, very confident they just have high floors, like Cam Ward, Colston Loveland, Matthew Golden, Will Campbell, Armand Membu, right? Mason Graham, Derek Harmon, and Malachi Starks. When I watch the film of those guys, I just trust implicitly that those guys are going to be some level of competent professional. And that's how I determined it. Are there guys with higher ceilings? Sure. Walter Nolan might be a good example of one of those, right? But I don't trust that he's going to be able to actualize that. I think when I look at those guys on film, I have a very high confidence that they're going to be at least starting caliber NFL football players. And I have a lot of questions about everybody else in the class.
Yeah, but then again, you get into the second round and down to like the 5th round, and there's a million dudes that are all kind of the same caliber. I'd show you. Hold on, if you give me a second, I can probably find it real quick. Because I just had the DTs up. I'm not trying to do a bit here. These are edge. Okay, there's DTs. Dane has through his last guy with a 4th, 5th round grade. So this is a better than pure 5th round grade. Is Riley Mills out of Notre Dame? That's his 23rd D tackle.
wild.
23 dudes
Wild.
with fourth, fifth round grades. You add the fifth rounders, you get 2 more. You're down to 25 dudes. Yaya Black out of Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the depth is great. Like you're always going to be able to get a D tackle later. That's kind of how this class is at that position. Running back in many ways is the same. You know, we haven't talked a ton about corner, but that is a position that's kind of the opposite. Especially if you're looking for outside corner, there's just not a lot of dudes. And Jeremy and I talked about this where he's got every corner going, and when he does his like 7-round mock, 25 spots higher than he's got him on his board, because unless you want a slot corner, you are going to need to kind of not take a chance, because there aren't a lot of dudes. And I think that is seen in your corner rankings, by the way, because you have Travis Hunter in tier 1, no one in tier 2, Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron in tier 3, and then all of a sudden you're down already in tier 4 for Ravel, Hairston, Amos, and Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah, and then it's like, even if you go down to tier 5 and it's Azaria Thomas and Jacob Parrish, and then it gets really thin, right? You're in the Noel Williams, Darren Porter conversation, who I like, but have limitations. And so and I think when you look at Siobhan Ravel, Maxwell Hairston, Trey Amos, Benjamin Morris, like, I think they all have the potential to be good football players, but there's all questions about all of them. It's just a funny position to evaluate because it's so scheme dependent when it gets to the NFL. So you're really evaluating traits. Like, they all have the traits, but Benjamin Morris has the injury. Siobhan Ravel coming off an injury, small school prospect. Trey Amos kicked around a bunch, couldn't really get a starting role until he got to Ole Miss. And again, the effort to me is a little up and down, but the ball skills are there, the size is there, the movement skills are there, and it's just like they're all kind of up in the air, and so that to me is one of the dangerous things about taking corner. But I think when you have a staff like this one and Joe Witt Jr.'s history and track record of developing corners, I think you would feel comfortable, if you love one of them, about getting that development that you're looking for. So
yeah, for sure. And then last but not least, let's talk about wide receiver. So you have no one in tier 1. Would you have, if Hunter was purely a wide receiver prospect, just for kicks and giggles, going back to that, would he be in tier 1 as a
maybe? I have a hard time with it because, again, like the rawness of him, but in terms of how he tracks the football, like it just, so
he would be your first receiver, but maybe above Golden in tier 2.
Yes, correct. I think that's probably where I would fall with it.
All right, so then you have Matthew Golden, who is fascinating as a prospect. And then you have Tet McMillan in tier 3, along with Emeka Egbuka. McMillan, I was listening to Dane and Derek and Robert Mays talk about him. Super fascinating because the instincts are there in terms of he comes back to the ball. He's got 6'4" size. Like, he's very quarterback friendly. But unlike a guy like T. Higgins, who does a lot of that stuff and is similar size, McMillan only has 31-inch arms. Higgins got 34-inch arms. So some of the size stuff, the catch radius shrinks a little bit. He doesn't have elite speed. There's great fits for him early in the first round. But why do you have him below a guy like Golden, who, from a production standpoint, doesn't have huge numbers at Texas, and kind of played second fiddle to a guy in Isaiah Bond, who's had one of the worst pre-draft processes I can remember in recent memory. But certainly isn't, like, Golden to me is just a fascinating prospect. You've got him above McMillan. Why?
Yeah, so that was kind of a last minute thing by me. And so basically what I did is I went back and watched them both. And I just, one thing that I really appreciate about Kyle Shanahan when he evaluates receivers, like, he really values the nuance of the position. And I think people sleep on how important it is. And so when you watch Golden, he doesn't lose any speed in the cuts. He's got a very diverse release package. He understands how to be friendly to the football. He catches the football at a high level. He understands how to vary tempo, accelerate, burst into blind spots, create space with stems. Like, it's textbook. It is textbook. And he reminds me a little bit, and people are going to freak out about this comp because AB was like a special player, but he kind of, there's hints of that to his game where I'm coming into a dig, and it looks like it's going to be a 5-step dig because I got to really decelerate. I can do it in 3 and then still come back to the football. Like, he just has that route running instinct and nuance. And so, again, what did I say about my tier 2 guys? It's all guys that I was like, this guy's going to be a good pro, right? And I think Tetro McMillan's ceiling could potentially be higher. But when you watch Tetro McMillan at Arizona, one of the things that I found really frustrating is that he took plays off, and even though he's a big guy who sinks extremely well, sinks and catches the football
really
at a really
fluid
high level,
mover,
like, he doesn't play through contact on his release very well. Even second level releases, like, he'll get stuck on guys in a way that at the NFL level, those guys will absolutely kill you because they're just better, stronger, faster kind of players. And so that was something I'm like, this is, if he doesn't get this fixed, it could really, like, he could be out of league in 3 years. Like, that's how important that skill set is. So again, he does the other things so well. The way he catches the football is like rivaled only by maybe Travis Hunter in this. Like, he catches the football like an absolute maniac, right? And again, for him to sink at 6'4" and do some of the stuff on like comebacks and digs, it's special. But again, that physicality through the release, through the second level, like, it's hard to get good at that. And he hasn't done it well at Arizona so far. So that's something where I was like, let me just pull the brakes back on this a little bit. Matthew Golden, I know, can do that. I know he's an NFL ready receiver.
So where's the gap in production then for Golden? Is it quarterback play?
I think it's quarterback play. I also think it's usage. Like, if you watch earlier in the year, like, it was Isaiah Bond's show, and then they were like, oh, hold up, like, actually Matthew Golden is better at this stuff, so he's going to get more production. You watch him in the Georgia game, like, he's the guy. Like, he is the guy, and he's running all sorts or any routes. He's lined up in multiple spots. He brings a ton of flexibility, and that's just and I know he's not 4.29 fast, but he's fast. He's quick. And so I think that was the thing that I settled on, is like, his floor is up here. And Tetra McMillan, his floor is a little bit lower. His ceiling may be higher, but I'm going to bet on the guy that I know is going to be a solid NFL contributing wide receiver. And that's why Golden's injured too.
I don't think either of them are going to be available at 29, but good background. There's definitely a chance that Emeka Egbuka is. I don't know that that's best case scenario for Washington. I think one of the edges, et cetera. But you want to talk about a guy with a high floor, super pro, 1,000% is going to have the Commander's tag.
Love him.
Emeka Egbuka is that guy. I think the question is, like, how does he fit in an offense? Like, what's the highest and best use of Emeka Egbuka?
Probably Puka Nacua. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I see.
Because he will block his face off.
He's going to go to LA. Like, and they're going to have another good, like, Cooper Kupp style guy there. You know what I mean? Like, that's what
the comparison that a couple guys I've heard use is Robert Woods.
Yeah, great. Exactly Robert Woods, right? He's physical, he's tough, he runs routes like we talked about with Matthew Golden. Like, he just does the receiver stuff well. Like, that's what he is. He's just a solid football player. So I think working him from tight splits where he can maximize his blocking, you can win matchups from a blocking standpoint against nickels and stuff, while also letting him run his diverse route tree, I think is exactly what you want. So in terms of fit here, it's a little bit like, could he play outside? Yeah. But do you love that? Probably not. Like, you love him in LA's offense where it's like, I'm going to insert Puka Nacua. He's going to run a little double stick and then run a go and catch a ball, a contested catch down the field. Like, that's what Egbuka feels like to me. But again, a very, very high floor player. That is, like, I just like him because he does the things that receivers don't normally do at a high level, and he plays the receiver position like it's supposed to be played.
Is there anybody else that we haven't talked about that at 29 you're like, I want to plant my flag that this guy's a possibility?
So the guy that I would just float out there, because I think he's super, super interesting. I think in my write-up I wrote he was one of the more interesting evaluations for receiver, for any position, was Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. He's 6'4 plus. He's 215, I want to say. He ran well. He jumped well. He tracks the football well. Like, when you watch him on tape at Iowa State, like, he's definitely more of a slot player. I think that's one of Jeremy Green's criticisms of him, is that he's a slot only type player. But despite that, when you watched him at the combine, he felt to me like a guy who could play outside. He could be your true X. And in a class that's kind of devoid of that player, like, Matthew Golden's not really that guy. Tetra McMillan, maybe. We talked about some of his limitations. And Buka's not that guy. Luther Burton's definitely not that guy. So now you're on your fifth dude, and it's him. And Jalen Knoll, who I absolutely love from Iowa State, is more of a true slot. Jack Beck, who I also love, is more of a true slot kind of block, gritty, big slot type player. Like, and we can keep going, but there's not a lot of players like who Trey Harris maybe is the next one. Kyle Williams, Troy Horton, and Umanor, but he's way down my list because of the stiffness. But so in terms of a guy at 29, where you're like, this guy makes our offense potentially way more diverse because he brings a true outside physicality. I'm interested in that. And so I just wanted to call attention to him. And again, do I think he can do that? I don't know. That's why it's hard, because he played more slot in college, right? That was more his thing. And some of the fighting through contact stuff that Tetra McMillan has, he has the same thing. He's got this basketball background. So you see the suddenness, short area stuff, but it's also like you're 6'4", 215, like don't get knocked off the spot. And so I just think it's important to call attention to a guy who would be making somewhat of a position change, but has the movement, the jumping, the explosive measurements, the speed to get that done. I think he catches the football at high level. So just a guy at 29 that I think could sneak in there and make some plays.
So 6'4", 214, 4.47 40, 1.54 10-yard split. But here's the big ones. He's got 33 3/4 inch arms,
big dude,
80-inch wingspan. So for comparison, that's almost 2 full inches bigger than Tat McMillan. And I know that doesn't sound like 2 inches, who cares? But like, go watch NFL stuff in slow motion and watch how fine and precise the margins are of a ball getting over a linebacker and those types of things, or the outstretched arms of a corner on an out route. If you can put that ball 2 inches farther outside on an out, and like that ball is out of bounds, but your receiver can get it and keep both feet in, like that's the difference in converting first downs and not in the NFL. And so a guy with that kind of physical profile is rare. Actually, do I still have it? I just marked it. Yeah. Is there anybody else with an 80-inch wingspan in the entire class? Not so you get to Savion Williams.
Who I actually have as a running back, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Also, there's the Nayor kid out of.
Dude, I love that kid. I don't know anything about his personality, but in terms
he ran
of
4.4 and has an 83.5-inch wingspan. I'm intrigued.
He's got 43. Yeah, he's 43-inch arms, and they get a 40-inch. Like he's a freak. That kid's a freak.
34-inch arms. You said 43. That would be freaky.
Yeah,
34.5-inch arms.
Yeah, he's a freaky dude. He's a freaky mover. Like watching him at the Shrine Bowl, I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like his short area quickness, and you're like, you're 6'5" almost, or you're 6'4" almost. Like, what the hell? But there's a reason no one's talking about him, and usually that means that there's something else going on. Kind of, you can be a silly goose sometimes, and I think he might be being a silly goose. But to your original point, it's a tight list of people that are measured and are as big as Jaden Higgins.
For sure. I think that covers most of the guys that, like, if we were to say, hey, these guys or the field, I think we've talked at least on some level about most of the guys that I would consider.
We mentioned Tyler Booker. I feel like I got to mention Donovan Jackson just as another kind of guard prospect at 29. Like there's
no way Zabel's still there, is it?
I don't think so. But again, this class is like that, right? Like you could easily say like Donovan Jackson, who no one's talking about for whatever reason, above Gray Zabel, Tyler Booker above Gray Zabel. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Gray Zabel here at 29. Like that's why it's weird. But I just felt like no one's really been talking about Donovan Jackson. But I think he's a sneaky kind of, if you're into like betting, a guy that could sneakily make it into the first round. And, I think about him playing next to, playing that left guard spot for Washington and just
next to Tunsil. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be pretty special because he talk about it, just a high floor football player. So another one that just kind of throw that out there.
Yeah. It's weird. As we've gone through this whole thing, I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't know if there's going to be someone that I'm like really jazzed about at 29. But also there's going to be a bunch of options. You're like, all right, we can work with that.
Yeah.
And
no, I think that's right.
It's going to depend on the draft. This could be, this could be one of the wildest drafts that we've had compared to like the mocks, which is hilarious because we also have had 0 trades, which has not happened in decades, where every single team has one first round pick. It is their own first round pick. And so it could both feel very stale because we're not going to have a bunch of trades. We also might get a bunch of trades, and it could be super chaotic. I don't even know what that's the other thing. There's no way it can be chalky because everyone's got different mock drafts. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Thursday night, round 1, we got coverage on the Team 980 live. I will actually be on until 8 that night. So my show typically 4 to 7, as hopefully you know. But we are on till 8, and then I will pass things over to Linnell and Toby, who will be doing our draft coverage. Logan will be doing stuff with the Commanders, and then I think our plan is to do something late night. We'll see
Yeah.
how the night goes. If there's a trade or whatever, we don't need to recap a trade. But if there is a trade, what we can do is we can then look at some of the top prospects for Friday available. So we will do something after the draft. The question of whether we're live very late at night on Thursday versus Friday morning is still up in the air, depending on what Adam Peters decides to do. So Adam, your future is in our control. We will also have a final mock draft for the first round later this week, at the very least, if not a longer mock draft. So Logan and I will work through those details, but mock draft coming later this week. And then we'll see what else we do this weekend to recap everything. And then we'll get back to the mailbags in a couple weeks as well. Some great questions sitting in my my mailbag question folder right now, Logan.
Love
so
that.
excited to dive back into those. All right, that's it. And that's all for this here podcast. Thanks for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already. For Logan, I'm Craig. See you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.